I used to believe I was the architect of my own universe. My name is Adam, and my kingdom was built on the 88th floor. From up there, the world it looks different. People become lights. Cars become streams of red and white. Problems become insignificant. My problems, other people's problems, they all just melted away into the grand, silent tapestry of the city I believed I owned. I had millions. A number so large it had ceased to have any real meaning. It was just a score, a testament to my intelligence, my ruthlessness, my will. I had built a financial empire from the ground up, or so I told myself. Every deal I closed, every risk I took, it felt like I was bending reality to my will. I didn't walk. I strode. I didn't talk, I declared. My reflection in the endless glass of my apartment was my closest confidant. We'd have conversations, him and I. I'd look into my own eyes and see a victor, a king, a man who had climbed so high he could no longer see the ground. And I liked it that way. The ground was for other people. My life was a carefully curated collection of expensive things and shallow relationships. My friends were my business partners. My love life was a series of calculated mergers. Even my charity was a transaction, a way to polish my public image. I would attend galas, write checks with a flourish of a pen, and feel a cold, sterile satisfaction as the cameras flashed. I was giving, yes, but only from my excess, and only for my own glory. I remember once, my assistant, a young, earnest man, told me his mother was sick. He needed some time off. I looked at him, not with compassion, but with irritation. His personal tragedy was an inconvenience to my schedule. I saw weakness. I approved his leave, but made a mental note. He's not hungry enough. That's how I saw the world. A pyramid of hunger. And I was at the apex, devouring it all. I thought I was invincible. I truly believed it. In my world, God was a concept for the weak, a comfort for those on the ground, the ones I looked down upon from my glass tower. I didn't need a higher power. I was my own higher power. I was the master of my fate, the captain of my soul. I had forgotten, or perhaps I had never learned, that a captain is nothing without the sea, and the sea answers only to its creator. And then came the night the sea rose up and swallowed my ship whole. It was 2:17 a.m., a time when only bad news travels. Kareem was my right hand, my pit bull in the boardroom. He was as ruthless as I was, a perfect reflection of my own ambition. When he called at this hour, it wasn't a social call. Adam, his voice was strained, brittle. It was a sound I had never heard from him before. Fear. What is it, Kareem? I said, my voice sharp with impatience. I was closing a major acquisition in the morning, and I needed my sleep. It's over, Adam, he whispered, and in those 3 words, the foundations of my kingdom cracked. What's over? Speak clearly, I snapped. But I knew. Deep down, a cold dread began to seep into the marrow of my bones, a feeling so alien I could barely process it. It was the feeling of losing control, he explained. It was a cascade of disasters. A betrayal. Our partner in the Far East, a man I had trusted, had leveraged our entire portfolio against a phantom asset. He had used our capital to cover his own catastrophic losses, and then vanished. It created a black hole, and our company was at its event horizon. The market was reacting. The authorities had been tipped off. By morning, everything would be frozen. Everything. Everything. My mind, usually a sharp, calculating instrument, became a maelstrom of denial. This wasn't possible. I was Adam. I had safeguards. I had contingencies for my contingencies. This happens to other people, the people on the ground, not to me. I spent the next hour in a frantic haze, making calls. I called my banker. His voice, usually so warm and deferential, was now cold, clinical, and distant. Our hands are tied, Adam. I called a government contact I had on my payroll. He didn't pick up. I called a rival I had once bailed out, demanding he return the favor. He laughed. The sound was like glass grinding in my ear. The sun began to rise. Usually, I loved the sunrise. It was a daily affirmation of my power, the world waking up to my rules. But this sunrise was different. The golden light that crept over the horizon didn't illuminate my kingdom. It exposed my ruin. The beautiful city wasn't mine anymore. It was just a place where I was trapped. That one phone call was the inciting incident. It was the single stone that starts an avalanche. My world, the one I had so arrogantly built with my own two hands, didn't just collapse. It was revealed to have been an illusion all along. My penthouse wasn't a castle. It was a cage made of glass, and the walls were about to shatter. The days that followed were a blur of failure. I tried to fight. I tried to use the only tools I knew: money, influence, and intimidation. But my money was no longer mine. It was a digital ghost, frozen in accounts I could see but not touch. My influence had evaporated overnight. The powerful men who once took my calls and laughed at my jokes now looked at me with a mixture of pity and contempt. I was no longer a player. I was a cautionary tale. I tried to use my intellect. I stayed up for 72 hours straight, fueled by coffee and desperation, trying to find a loophole, a legal strategy, a way out. I was a genius, wasn't I? But my mind, which once saw angles and opportunities everywhere, was now just a frantic mess of fear and regret. It was like trying to solve a complex equation while drowning. The external collapse triggered an internal one. My fiancée, Sarah, a woman whose beauty I had acquired like a rare piece of art, sat me down in our living room, the same room where we had hosted a party for hundreds just weeks before. Now it was silent. "I can't do this, Adam," she said, not meeting my eyes. Her bags were packed by the door. "Do what?" "Sarah, this is a setback. I'll fix this. I always fix things," I pleaded. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. I was begging. I had never begged for anything in my life. She finally looked at me, and her eyes were empty of the admiration I was so used to. "I signed up for a life of success, of security. Not this." She gestured vaguely at our surroundings, at me. This was my failure. This was my weakness, and it was repulsive to her. She left. The sound of the front door closing was like a gunshot in the silent tomb of my apartment. The loss of her was different from the loss of the money. It was personal. It proved that my love was just another transaction, and my credit had run out. The eviction notice was the final nail in the coffin. From the 88th floor to a ground floor apartment in a part of the city I used to fly over without a second thought. The contrast was a physical blow. The air in the new place was thick, with the smell of damp and old cooking oil. The paint on the walls was peeling, revealing layers of past lives, past sorrows. A single, naked bulb flickered from a wire in the ceiling, casting long, dancing shadows that felt like specters of my failure. I dropped my suitcase. The sound was pathetic, swallowed by the grim silence. There was no one to call, no one to blame but myself. My friends were gone. My love was gone. My empire was gone. My pride was shattered into a million pieces. I sat on the edge of a lumpy, stained mattress. For the first time in my adult life, I was truly, utterly, and completely alone. Stripped of my wealth, my status, my identity. I was no longer Adam, the king. I was just Adam. A man in a dark room. And that's when I broke. I didn't cry loudly. It was a silent, internal collapse. A hollowing out. I had hit rock bottom. And what's terrifying about rock bottom is the realization that you can't fall any further. There's nowhere to go. You are just there, in the dark. The arrogance I had worn like a suit of armor had been stripped away, and underneath was just a raw, terrified heart. A heart that was softer, more broken, and more ready to listen than it had ever been in my entire life. I laid back on that lumpy mattress, staring at the water-stained ceiling, the city noise outside, the sirens, the arguments, the life I was no longer a part of, faded into a distant roar. All I could hear was the frantic, useless beating of my own heart and the sound of my own shallow breathing. I had nothing. I was nothing. And in that nothingness, something happened. It came from a nearby masjid, a sound I had probably heard thousands of times in my life but had never truly listened to. It was the adhan, the call to prayer. In my old life, it was just background noise, part of the city's soundtrack. But in this room, in this silence, in this utter brokenness, it wasn't noise. It was a voice. Allahu Akbar, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. God is greater. I bear witness that there is no God but God. Greater than what? Greater than my loss? Greater than my pain? Greater than the empty space in my chest where my pride used to be? The words, ancient and yet brand new, washed over me. They weren't an accusation. They felt like an invitation, a lifeline thrown into the abyss where I was floating. And then a memory surfaced, a memory I had buried under decades of ambition and arrogance. My grandfather. He wasn't a rich man. He was a carpenter. His hands were calloused and rough, but his smile was the gentlest thing I had ever known. He would wake up for Fajr every single day. I remember asking him once, "Grandpa, why do you wake up when it's still dark? God can hear you anytime." He had looked at me, his eyes twinkling. "Ah, Adam," he said, ruffling my hair, "but this is the time when the world is quiet, and it is easiest to hear him." His face in my memory was filled with a peace, a sakina, that my millions could never buy. He had nothing, and yet he had everything. I had everything, and I had nothing. The irony was so profound, it felt like a physical weight on my chest. The adhan finished, and the silence that returned was different. It wasn't an empty silence anymore. It was a waiting silence, a hopeful silence. I had exhausted every option. My friends, my money, my intellect, my pride. They had all failed me. They were all false gods, idols I had worshipped at my own altar. And they had crumbled to dust. There was only one direction I hadn't turned. I didn't know how to pray. I vaguely remembered the motions from childhood, watching my grandfather. But the words were gone. The structure was a mystery. A voice in my head, the familiar, cynical voice of my old self, screamed at me. "What are you doing? You're a fool, a hypocrite. You only turn to God now that you're desperate." But another voice, a quieter one, a whisper from the softest part of my broken heart answered back. "Yes, I am. And what else have I got left?" So I stood. I faced a direction I hoped was right. I raised my hands, and it felt like lifting mountains. I didn't know Surat al-Fatiha. I didn't know the formal words, so I just spoke, not with my lips, but with my soul. "God," I whispered into the quiet room. "Allah, if you are there, if you can hear me, I'm sorry. I'm lost. I broke everything. I have nothing left. Please, help me." I prostrated, my forehead meeting the cold, dusty floor, the floor of my rock bottom. And in that moment, for the first time in my life, I wasn't looking down on the world from my throne. I was looking up, from the lowest possible point. And in that posture of utter surrender, I felt something shift, a release. A single, hot tear escaped my eye and soaked into the dirty floorboard. It wasn't a tear of sadness. It was a tear of relief. It was the first step, the pivot, the moment my real life began. Turning to Allah in a moment of desperation is one thing. Staying on that path when the desperation fades and the hard work begins, that is the real test, the mujahada, the struggle. And my struggle was immense. The change was not instantaneous. It wasn't a lightning bolt. It was a slow, painful, and often clumsy journey back to a home I had never known. I bought a Quran. I couldn't read the Arabic. The beautiful script was just elegant squiggles to me. But it came with a translation. I started reading from the beginning. Some verses flew over my head. But others felt like they were written just for me at that exact moment. And we will surely test you with something of fear and hunger and the loss of wealth and lives and fruits, but give good tidings to the patient. Quran 2-155. I read that line and I had to put the book down. I just stared at the wall. A test. He was telling me this was a test. It wasn't a random, meaningless punishment. It had a purpose. This one idea reframed my entire catastrophe. I wasn't a victim of fate. I was a student in a divine classroom. Learning to pray was the hardest part. The 5 daily prayers became the 5 pillars of my day. But my mind, so used to the chaos of the financial world, was a wild horse. As I stood for Salah, a storm of thoughts would rage. Regrets about my past, anxieties about my future. The whispers of Shaitan were relentless. "Look at you," the voice would hiss, playing the holy man. "Just yesterday you were drowning in sin. Do you really think God accepts this pathetic display? You are a fraud." There were days I would finish a prayer and feel nothing but frustration. I would feel empty, like I was just going through the motions. The sweetness my grandfather spoke of felt a million miles away. I felt like giving up almost every single day. The pull of my old life, or at least the memory of it, was strong. One afternoon, I ran into an old associate on the street. He looked me up and down, his eyes filled with a smug pity. "Adam, heard you took a bit of a tumble," he said, a smirk playing on his lips. "Listen, I've got a little something going on. A bit gray area, but for a guy with your old talents, you could be back on your feet in a month." The offer was a gateway back to the world I knew, the world of easy money, of blurred lines, of ego. For a moment the old Adam stirred within me. The hunger returned, but then I thought of the feeling of my forehead on the ground, of the peace that sometimes, just for a fleeting second, touched my heart when I read the Quran. I thought of my grandfather's smile. "Thanks for the offer, Mark," I said, and my voice was steady. "But I'm on a different path now." He laughed, shook his head, and walked away, probably to tell everyone how Adam had completely lost his mind. But as he walked away, I didn't feel shame. I felt light. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental. I had been offered a taste of my old dunya, and I had chosen my new akhirah. Slowly, very slowly, things began to change. I started to find a strange comfort in the routine of prayer. The whispers of Shaitan didn't disappear, but their voice grew weaker. My voice, the one that chose to be there, grew stronger. One evening during Isha prayer, as I was in prostration, thinking about another verse I had read, "Does he not know that Allah sees?" Quran 96-14. Suddenly, the reality of that verse crashed into me. He sees. He saw my arrogance in the penthouse. He saw my lonely desperation in this tiny room. And he saw me now, my head on the floor, trying. He saw the struggle. He saw the effort. And in that moment of realization, a wave of warmth spread through my chest. The sweetness. It was real. It was the first time I truly felt a connection, a profound sense of being seen and known by the Creator of the universe. That small victory was worth more than all the millions I had ever possessed. It was the first real profit I had ever made. Months turned into a year. Did I get my wealth back? No. Did I reclaim my penthouse on the 88th floor? No. The resolution to my story wasn't the one my old self would have written, and for that I am eternally grateful. The true resolution was internal. The great opening, the fath, wasn't in my bank account. It was in my heart. I got a job at a local library. The pay is modest. My work is simple. I stack books. I help people find stories. I am surrounded by silence and knowledge. And I have never felt richer in my entire life. I realized Allah didn't take my wealth to punish me. He took it to save me. He saved me from my own arrogance, from the prison I had built for myself. He didn't test me to break me. He tested me to introduce himself to me. I had to lose everything I thought was valuable to find the only thing that truly is. I finally understood the meaning of some of his beautiful names, not as theological concepts, but as living realities. I had known him as Al-Mughni, the enricher, when I was counting my millions, but that was a shallow knowledge. I truly came to know him as a Razak, the provider, when I felt overwhelming gratitude for a simple meal of bread and lentils. I had experienced Al-Mu'iz, the honorer, and Al-Mudhil, the dishonorer, not as a cosmic judge, but as a wise teacher who humbled me to honor me with something far greater than status, submission. And most of all, I came to know Al-Jabbar. We often think of this name as meaning the compeller, the mighty, but another of its beautiful meanings is the restorer, the mender of the broken. He didn't just mend my broken finances, he mended my broken heart, my broken spirit, my broken connection to him. He took the shattered pieces of my pride and rebuilt me into someone who could finally see. My new normal is this: a small apartment that feels more like a home than my penthouse ever did. A simple job that brings me more peace than my empire ever could. A handful of true friends from the local masjid, brothers who love me for the sake of Allah, not for the size of my wallet. And a heart that is, for the first time, at peace. I still live in the same city. The lights still glitter at night, but when I look at them now, I don't see a kingdom to be conquered. I see a beautiful creation, a sign of the majesty of its creator. I no longer feel like a king looking down. I feel like a humble servant, looking up in awe and gratitude. I lost everything I thought I wanted, only to be given everything I truly needed. Alhamdulillah, all praise and thanks are for God. If you are watching this and you feel like you are at your rock bottom, if you feel lost, broken, and alone, know that the ground beneath you is not just an endpoint. It is also a prayer mat. Know that the moment you feel you have nothing left is the exact moment you are ready to receive everything. Turn to Him. Even if your words are clumsy, even if your heart is full of doubt, even if you feel like a hypocrite, just turn. Because His mercy is closer to you than your own jugular vein, and His plan for you is more beautiful than anything you could ever architect for yourself. May Allah Al-Jabbar mend every broken heart that is listening. May He replace your losses with something far greater. May He turn your lowest point into the turning point of your entire life. Ameen.